just going to ask. I was just going to ask each person to just do. Sorry, I'm getting a really annoying echo here. I don't know why. Just asking each person to do a very brief introduction, just their name and
sorry,
the
Andrea,
house that we're.
sorry, Andrea, you're recorded. You're echoing all over the place.
Yeah.
So, do you have another speaker that's running? Or
No.
do you have two speakers running?
No.
Can everyone make sure you put yourself on mute just to, okay, we'll give this a try again.
Okay. I'm not getting an echo now, so, okay. So sorry, just each person, just if you can introduce yourself, really just your name, your position and what house you're affiliated with, and then we'll get started with the discussion. So Joe, I'll pass it to you first.
Hi, Joe McReynolds. I'm currently a board member of Abbeyfield Canada, as well as being the chair of the Caledon Abbeyfield. On to the next. Don't be shy here.
Yeah. Evelyn?
I'm Evelyn Dutrasac, and we don't have a home, but we have a committee, an Abbeyfield committee, and I'm looking at a retirement home and redevelopment beds to start off with an Abbeyfield. I ran for mayor, and I'm meeting the new mayor. He knows that I promoted Abbeyfield, and I really think this is a solution from Greater Sudbury. I'm going to be working with developers, and I'm glad to be a national board member of Abbeyfield. I believe in our cause, and I think it's a solution. It's the solution for a lot of our older adults. I'll be working very closely, so I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks, Evelyn. Ian?
Ian Johnson, Abbeyfield, Vancouver board member under the able leadership of Larry Shapiro, who might want to be next.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Larry?
Good morning, all, and thank you for that introduction. My star board member, Ian Johnson. Good morning. Good morning, all. I'm the chair of Vancouver Abbeyfield Society. Nice to see you all.
Thanks, Larry. Ruth Howland?
Morning, I'm zooming in from Sydney, St. Andrews, Abbeyfield House. We've been around for 35 years. We were the first house.
Thanks, Ruth. Agnes?
Hi, I'm Agnes Warda. I'm the VP of the Abbeyfield Polonia House, Provisional House, and we're working very hard to become the real house.
Thanks, Agnes. Cheryl, did you want to introduce yourself? I think most people know you, but.
Okay, I'm Cheryl Dean. I'm the International Partnership Manager, but I'm also the chair of a house in Pandon, South Africa.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Sylvia? Sylvia?
Hi, I'm Sylvia Gent. I'm the president of Abbeyfield, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Sylvia. And Kathy? Kathy in Saskatoon?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Kathy from Saskatoon. I'm the treasurer on the board for Abbeyfield Saskatoon. And I was just saying, Rhonda, maybe you can you delete that second Kathy Stocky there? Because that was me. I guess it got, because I did try twice. And it's nice to meet you, Sylvia. I've been meaning to get there and meet you in person, but it just hasn't happened. So nice to meet you here anyway.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks, Kathy. Bill?
Yes, I'm the director and treasurer of Abbeyfield Canada, as well as director and treasurer of Abbeyfield Toronto.
And Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I'm a brand new board member with Caledon East Abbeyfield, and I'm just Thrilled to be here today.
We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. We have someone who doesn't have their video on, but John.
Okay, do you want to put John? Yes, my name's John Schenk. I am, we're just starting out in Wingham, Ontario. My wife, Colleen, is also on the board. I guess we are. I'm not sure we're there long enough to be called anything official, but we're trying to organize, and I wanted to try to understand as much as I could. I'm a lawyer practicing in this town of relatively small, and my wife is the secretary of our board.
Great. Well,
I'm
thank
good
you.
at learning what I can.
Yeah, welcome, John and Colleen. So we'll start the discussion. Really, I think we want to touch on three main areas here. So the first one being recruitment of volunteers. The second one being volunteer responsibilities, or how you have used volunteers in your house. You can pass on any tips or any issues that you've encountered. And then recognition we'll finish up with that little bit there. So what we usually do for these clubhouses is kind of each person gets a bit of a turn to talk. And if you want to recount, things that have come up at your house, or if you just want to ask a general question, that's fine as well. So now, Evelyn, there isn't a house in Sudbury at this time, correct?
Yes, there is no house right now, but we have a committee. We're looking at working with developers, but we're also looking at long-term care homes. Pioneer Manor, we've set up a committee, and it's a trilingual committee, First Nation, English and French, and we've made presentations to council about there's 100 redevelopment beds, and we want 42 of those rooms that could be Abbeyfield. We've worked with Central Mortgage and Housing, Jeff Calibash, and we've worked with the feds, and we're working with the Minister of Housing, Steve Clark. And I've also met the Premier of Ontario. When I was running for mayor in the fall, I had a private meeting with Doug Ford, and he's very much in favor. I've given him a letter that JP sent to me and Dennis, and I'm working to develop 42 rooms at Pioneer Manor. I'm going to be meeting with our new mayor. I came second. Paul Lefebvre is the new mayor, and he's going to be meeting with me. And I'm meeting also with Steve Jake, who already knows our intention, has been following and working with JP, Dennis, and myself. So I really want, even though we don't have it, but I'm going to be listening very closely, because I have a lot of volunteers that are interested, and I've recruited about 10 volunteers right now to sit on that committee with us.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Evelyn. Ian and Larry, maybe you two fellows can kind of trade off your talking there about Vancouver House. How have you dealt with volunteer recruitment in the past and in the present?
I'm going to, Ian, are you there? I just see your picture.
I would like you to lead, because you've got far more experience of the Vancouver situation than I do.
Okay, I'll tell you why. I want to pass one part of it to you, and that is our association with the Langara gerontology department, and how that's working out, because I think that's important. Can you cover that? Because you've been working with the young lady as well.
Yeah, very briefly, there's a school, Langara College. It has a very new gerontology department. One of their students has got a volunteering assignment with our house, very detailed, very demanding, very much supervised. And she's just started working with us in January. We look forward to continuing that connection. And also we look forward to building an ongoing connection with Langara College and the facilities there. Is that appropriate, Larry?
Yeah, I'd like you to speak a little bit about how the relationship has developed between her and the residents, And understand, everybody, we have 2 houses when we have 16 residents, because I think that's well worth pointing out on how they relate to her, being young and being involved, of course, in things that are of interest to seniors, being a gerontology student.
Yeah, so we have a resident meeting every month where both houses in the 10 to 16 people are present together with board members. And at the meeting, I think it was in probably November, we met with the student and she was present at the meeting, introduced herself. She is young, which means under 50 as far as I'm concerned. But she's actually a mature student. She's got a long and interesting background. She's Turkish. She was a patent attorney, I think, or a patent translation professional and a lawyer in Turkey, and has come to Canada, has fallen in love with what we're doing here at Abbeyfield. And so it's going to be an interesting sort of disruptive influence, in a sense, or multi-generational influence, passing the baton from one generation to another. I hope that covers your question, Larry.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got the connection with a very aggressive. You haven't met Jasmine, unfortunately, the leader of this gerontology program. But I think we should all somehow align ourselves with something involved in gerontology to give the students their, and I'm talking, when I say students, it's not high school, this is masters and doctorate students as well, to give them a hands-on at the point that they're building their knowledge academically. To have hands-on experience is absolutely invaluable. And this is one of the regions where we're getting our volunteers from. Elsewhere, again, I'm not sure if they will fall under the category of volunteers, but I'm trying to back up our coordinators. We have 2 full-time cooks and coordinators, of course, and and if they're getting paid, I don't suppose you would consider them volunteers, but I'm finding some very interesting backup for their days off, et cetera, and bringing in a lot of new blood there. And one thing I'm very, very conscious of, and I think that anybody here who's on the boards of any Abbeyfield, is we have to always be building up the future board of directors, because some of people who've been in some of the older established houses knows that if you don't keep your eye on the ball, the boards can just through attrition pretty much disintegrate. And if you don't have a backup ready, there is a problem. So this is why I'm introducing as many new people into as many positions as I possibly can. Some of them are on the payroll, and some of them are volunteers.
Can I just ask a question, Larry?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, on Ian. So you have this gerontology student, but how is she benefiting the residents?
What's the program called, Ian? It's an academic term starting with a P, I think. What is she?
Well, she's actually being supervised by Lindsay, our other board member, who is a gerontologist. So I'm not supervising her. It's Lindsay that's doing the supervision and knows the details. And it actually is more or less holding her accountable. The gerontology program is very demanding. And I think they're glad to have Lindsay supervising the students. But I don't know the name of the program.
Okay, but she's not what is she called? She has an official position, and that's part of the course. I just forget the academic term.
But I'm asking, how does she benefit the residents? Like, we want volunteers.
Good. Okay, listen. Of course, that's the question, and somehow I don't, I think that Ian expounded on that, but let him say it again. If she misses a meeting, they definitely miss her and ask, where is she? Could you speak again and just reinforce that? Because that's the most important thing, Andrea, of course, is not so much how she relates to the residents, but how the residents have accepted and relate to her. I pass it to you, Ian.
So what I'd like to do is find out more about what's going on. I've actually got meetings scheduled in the February 2nd, 6th, and February 2nd, 9th, and 16th, and I'm going to be finding out more. So I can give you a report at the next meeting. Would you like that? Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been extremely positive, and I think the intergenerational factor comes into this as well, Andrea. So it's really multifaceted. We'll get back to you, but
yeah, the multi-generational thing is very important. Actually, I do happen to know that this student has a specific interest in multi-generational and intergenerational learning. So that's one of the facets that she has a personal interest in.
I'll be very interested to know.
And Andrea, it is a formal part of her education. She has to do something, and after I spoke with the supervisor, I think that the relationship that we're going to have with Langara is going to go on forever because of the success.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be interested in knowing what she's actually doing. Is it primarily research, or is she doing other things as a volunteer?
You'll get a full report, I promise. You'll take care of that, Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia, and a good question.
Thanks.
Okay. Ruth, in Sydney, how is your house dealing with volunteers? Do you have many volunteers? And if so, what roles have they been taking on?
We've had a variety of volunteers over the years, but right now there's very few actual volunteers coming in and doing things. We've had everything from somebody coming in and playing bridge with the people, or somebody coming in and always bringing birthday presents and whatever, knowing when birthdays happen. We've got a bit of a younger group of people now at the house. We only have 9 residents, but it's interesting the change in the residents from years ago. We now have 4 cars, like 4 different residents that drive, which is just so different. So they actually have been more independent in the sense that they set up their own they do exercises every morning together, and they do a variety of other things in the evening. So it's changing. It is interesting that our average age is gone from sort of 89 to, I don't know, closer to 80 or 75. Not 75, probably 80 now, but it is an interesting thing that they're not quite interested in the same type of volunteer.
Okay, so are you actively recruiting volunteers at this time, or just letting people come in if they are interested?
At this time, it's probably if they're interested, but it's something that we've always had. And it's nice to have somebody coming in and volunteering.
Okay.
I mean, at one point too, each person has their own little garden. We had a person come in and help them with their gardens. As we all get older, it's harder to find that type of person, but.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth. And Agnes, now you're a provisional house. So you don't really have a house that requires volunteers at this point. I guess you have volunteers on your board, obviously.
Well, we have volunteers on our board, that's true. And for now, there's 5 of us, but we are slowly realizing that we need to spread our wings because there's too many things happening at once. We went through very grueling process of registering as a charitable organization, and that was, Rhonda knows how difficult it was and how much time consuming. We finally did it. We don't know if it's correct or not, but we are at the stage, actually today, they are having later meeting discussing our options, what to do next, because the problem is, on one side, there were a number of attempts to establish some sort of facility for seniors, and they were all failed. So the community is kind of saying, hey, another one, what are you going to do? So it's making getting volunteers a little bit more difficult. And what we're trying to do is to recruit them. And we have currently recruited 2, which are basically going to the 2 LTCs, which are dealing with the population, the language population, and they pass through all the motions, and they are there in case we need them for something else. But we're trying to see what other areas we will need the volunteers, because we just don't want to get them. We need to give them the purpose of being there. So we're trying to establish the plan how to best utilize, because we have some people saying, I will be interested, what can I do for you? So we're trying to map up a kind of a way. That's why I'm listening to all this, what you are saying, to see what we can do with them. And another things we also using this time for, we are learning from you and from other sources. What does it mean to be a board? What does it mean to run volunteers that will be at the later stage looking or helping us running the house? So we, at that stage, we are basically recruiting and learning at the same time and trying to find the purpose. So for that reason, the responsibilities area, it's kind of, I'm curious, because I already see how you're trying to get after getting volunteers, which I have to say it's increasingly difficult. And most of the organization I'm working with are basically complaining that people don't want to volunteer. Especially the younger generation. We mostly rely on seniors or mature adults, or what the hell we call them these times, because the political correctness, we never know. Right now, I think we are mature adults, I believe. So for now, that's as far as we are. I might have my few cents on the other 2 topics, but for now, thank you very much. I'm soaking the knowledge from all of you, so I'm very thankful that I can have this opportunity to learn.
Thanks, Agnes. Sylvia, you've probably had a lot of volunteers in Prince Albert over the years. So what have you found to be the volunteer experience, and are you having challenges at this time getting volunteers if you want them?
Back when we were building and fundraising, until we paid off our mortgage, we had a large number of volunteers doing bingos for us. And that was a major role of volunteers at that time. And we got them by word of mouth. We got them through newspaper articles about the fact that we were building, that kind of thing. And we had a really good group. Now, once we paid off our mortgage, we no longer did bingos. And a lot of those volunteers, left and didn't work with us anymore. We still use volunteers to help with our spring tea. And of course, our board are all volunteers. We have one person doing laughter yoga and one person doing chair yoga once a week and coming in. We have volunteers who do baking from time to time, but we don't use a lot of volunteers anymore. We don't really need them. And we, go out and ask people we know if we needed volunteers and that kind of thing, because we certainly don't need large numbers anymore. We have a part-time recreation director, and she does, quite a bit with the residents. And I guess volunteers sometimes drive residents to concerts and things like that, if there aren't enough residents who can drive that are going to the concert. But quite a lot of our residents drive as well. And so volunteerism is not nearly as big as it was before we paid off the mortgage.
Yeah, it's different for Sylvia, in case people don't know. Prince Albert isn't a huge community. It's not like Toronto or Vancouver. And you have gotten to know people within the community over the years. So you know who you can call upon, I would guess, right? If you do need someone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
And
good
then-
situation.
And then when we were needing a lot of volunteers would call on their friends and so on and so on. So it was a time when we had a lot, but we don't now.
Yeah. Bill, thanks, Sylvia. Bill, did you want to comment on Scarborough Bluffs and your experience with volunteers in the past and currently?
Yes, well, we, like Sylvia and other houses have been around for a while, we've gone through times when we have quite a few volunteers, and then less so now, I would say. And part of the reason is, well, for example, we had one volunteer who came in every week and chatted with the residents over the lunch hour, and then he would do small things like maybe change a light bulb in their room, or he would drive the residents a little bit. But then when COVID hit, of course, he stopped coming, and the same with some of the others. So it's kind of hard to rebuild that back up. Now, we do have long-term people have been associated with the Abbeyfield. I think of a former president and former board member who from time to time, well, actually a former board member who stepped down, didn't want to be a board member, but now is, we call, a friendly volunteer, and comes and visits the residents once a week and sits with them at lunchtime and chats with them for a few hours once a week, which is very helpful. And there are other, when we do events like maybe a Christmas party or whatever, former board member and of course friends and my wife often do things at the house on an ad hoc basis. So we'd always like to build up more volunteers. I think we can never have enough, but generally I find now our first priority really is to get more board members who are volunteers rather than just straight volunteers at the house. So it's an ongoing process, and word of mouth, of course, still derives a lot of people that we tend to get. And oh, incidentally, we did do some advertising for volunteers about a little less than a year ago, and that did bring some people. And but then it was kind of during the end of COVID, and so it was like, do you want to get people in the house and not? And there's always that degree. So I think I find we're have experienced the overhang of COVID, although it's largely gone now from people's thoughts. Well, not from their thoughts, but I think the fallout has been pretty great from that, actually.
Thanks, Bill.
Excuse me, can I just add one thing? I forgot one of our major categories of volunteers, and that's our entertainers. We have quite a few people that come in and entertain at Abbeyfield.
Thanks, Sylvia. Bill, did you have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. It's just that it is an ongoing thing, and we're very thankful for any of the volunteers that come in. And as I say, a lot of ex-board members can often be, or ex-volunteers can come back and do things too. So I would say, remember who was around the house and who liked it, but maybe dropped off for various reasons. They can sometimes be very helpful in the future. They have a soft spot for Abbeyfield, as everybody does, and sometimes they can continue to help on an ad hoc basis.
Thanks, Bill. Kathy, what has Saskatoon Houses experience been as far as you know?
Yeah. My experience has been very limited. I've only been on the board for less than a year, and we are, as I don't know if everybody knows, we're pretty much a board in crisis right now. So getting volunteers, we're really trying to find more board members. We only have 4 of us, and there's only basically 2 that are fairly active, that myself and the vice president. And the vice president is Peter Coolin, and he is not here today because of he's being considered for priesthood in his church right now, and he's going through a process. So he couldn't be with us today, and unfortunately he does have a long-term, he has a long run with the board, and so he could have told you a little bit more. Currently we have, particularly in the summer, we have had a program called Fine Options. I don't know if it's Saskatoon specific, but people who are working off their fines have worked in our yards and done cleanup and those kinds of things. That is still there and offering, but it's less so inside the house. So I haven't seen a lot of volunteers doing work inside the house. But if they needed something, you know, with putting up light bulbs or helping the tenants with things, we would certainly consider them if they have proper clearance and everything. Other volunteers, we have our night coordinator, Benita Chad. She gives, or she has in the past. I understand she's not as active anymore, but she would, you know, weekly or a few times a week offer some art projects that the tenants could come together and work on together and that kind of thing. That was more internal. And I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with other programs. We do have a few things that have come in that I'm hoping we can get somebody to follow up on, because it's, as somebody mentioned, entertainers that are asking if they could come in and that kind of thing. But we kind of don't have people even on the board to help make sure that all happens. We do have a part-time house manager, and she's very good, but she's also going to school right now, so we don't have a full-time, so she can't stay on top of all of that either. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot to tell you, but yeah, if we don't get more board members, the few that are there are going to be burnt out very quickly, and I'm afraid it's even going to get smaller. So I'm hoping to learn a few things here, how to attract some volunteers, and hopefully we can find somebody who can look after that. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, Kathy.
I remember from my day with Saskatoon that you had nursing students coming in. That would be before your time. And the nursing students did various activities with the residents, and they were appreciated a lot. Florence had organized and facilitated that, and it was a good program.
Thanks, I'll check into that.
Right, thank you for that, Sylvia and Kathy. Jim, do you want to talk about Ottawa House? Oh, you have to turn your mic on, Jim. It's still off. Oh, there we go.
Sure. Unless there's somebody else on the call from Abbeyfield, I joined late, so I don't know.
No,
Ottawa.
I think you're the only one, Jim.
Oh, okay. Well, just going back to Saskatoon for a minute, there were 2 people that joined the board there some time ago who were both studying postgraduate degrees, I think, in Saskatoon, and one of them stayed for a couple of years and one of them stayed quite a bit longer and was in fact president. So there may be a chance of contacting the the college or whatever it is in Saskatoon and find out if there are people there that would like board experience. As for Ottawa, people come and go, politicians come and go quite quickly in Ottawa, and so a lot of the residents are fairly transient as well. We have somebody on the board who is a volunteer director, and their prime responsibility is to advertise any vacancies and to do the first look at any applications coming in and pass on any likely applicants to somebody else for a final interview. That works very well because there is someone on the board whose job it is to find. And I think we found it very difficult to attract volunteers prior to that. I mean, everybody was asked to try, and that usually results in nobody doing anything. So I encourage boards to find somebody to join their board specifically to look for volunteers. We advertise in Volunteer Ottawa and also through Indeed. It's meant that we've ended up over the last year, we've ended up with a lot of younger people. I think probably we've probably got about 5 people on the board now who are just either side of 30. And then there's a big gap to me, who's 50 years older than most of them. But we're trying to get a couple more retired people on the board, because the folk that are around 30 have all got jobs or studying and have a limited amount of time. But they are committed. And we have 2 directors who come from down near Cornwall. So that's an hour away from Ottawa. But they both have jobs where they said they can do it, they can commit the time. And one of them is the property director. We have a couple of handymen. So his job was basically to set out the policy, decide what needs to be done, to work with contractors and so on, and a couple of local handymen, and that works. He doesn't have to get involved on a daily basis. So I think Agnes is probably aware there's a couple of provisional houses in Ottawa right now, with potentially a 3rd one. So there's a lot of Abbeyfields looking for people right now in Ottawa, and there seems to be enough volunteers around, even though we hear all over that organizations are struggling. However, I mean, if you're making a continual effort to find them, my experience is that they are there, certainly in Ottawa anyway.
Oh, thanks, Jim. You had some good suggestions, I think, and a lot of places do have their own local volunteer organizations. Like you mentioned, Volunteer Ottawa, I think it was. Yeah. And I know we have Volunteer Manitoba in here. So that would be something, if people are seeking volunteers, maybe to see if there is a citywide or provincial organization that kind of acts as a central clearing board for volunteers. They'll advertise positions, and then people will apply kind of through that organization to your own organization. Yeah. I'd like to move on, if we could, to Jennifer to talk about Culloden House.
Hi, Andrea. Sorry, I think I'm going to probably defer to Joe just because I'm brand new.
Okay.
I'm still sort of in the process of orientation. So I know that Joe is on. And
thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
2 things. So one, COVID, like Bill, has been a challenge for us with the use of volunteers. Pre-COVID, we were using volunteers for social activities or events, some help with property management, etc. That has that's pretty much ceased during the COVID period. And so our volunteers over the last few years now have been restricted to pretty much our board level. But we have decided at Abbeyfield Caledon to mount a volunteer management process here. We've got some individuals who are interested in helping us develop a volunteer program. We've applying for some support financially to do so. And I, my background, I've had three, I guess, of my career activities. I've had volunteer management as a part of that responsibilities. Sometimes, in the one organization, we were responsible for over 100,000 volunteers. So volunteer management is what I would suggest that, we need to really think about as a group. And for me, that means that you don't treat a volunteer as just somebody who's available to help, in the sense that you have a process where you train the volunteers, you clarify the expectations that you have of each volunteer so that there's a very clear expectation of what you expect them to deliver on, that you have, I call care and feeding, you have some ability to give everybody the support they need, because volunteers actually need a lot of support because they don't know your system well, they don't know and they need to be assured a lot of times that they are doing the right thing. And finally, you need to recognize them. And I know we're going to talk about recognition in a few minutes. But I would say as an Abbeyfield movement, if we're pushing volunteers beyond the board, we need to really talk about what we do with volunteer management, what that means for the organizations, et cetera, as a whole. As we're, at Abbeyfield Caledon, we're interested in getting support for the residents, in helping them with anything that they require. We're interested in social programming because, again, like most Abbeyfield homes, we do not have the staffing that is available or necessarily trained to do social programming. And the whole issue of property management is one where Jim, you'll be interested to know we're in a transition of property management again. So we're looking at a variety of activities, including some further volunteer support for that. So that's where we're at.
You've mentioned some very interesting things, Joe. Do you have any suggestions then for some of the maybe the newer houses, the provisional houses, in terms of how they should approach like setting up a volunteer management program or designating a specific person? Those are two ideas I think that you came up with.
Well, I think in most cases, the provisional homes are looking at probably board development more than they are service activity at the moment. So, again, I do a lot of recruitment. Recruitment is is the responsibility of everybody that's involved with an organization. In other words, the board themselves are the ones who are the best recruiters of other board members, no matter where you're located. And it's often hard because we put out advertisements at times, but advertisements, yes, you reach some people, some of them are excellent, but it's really putting the message out to your involvement, your own board members. Who do you know? What friends do you know? What relatives do you know that might know somebody that would really help out in this situation? Obviously, in the board level, we're always looking at what skills do we need and what experiences do we need. So it's always a good idea to take the time to sit down and identify what are the skills that really would help you be an effective board, for example. And once you've got then, you can start talking to your friends, to your relatives, and advertise too. But today there's enough social media opportunities for advertisement that you probably don't need to go with the paid level too often, depending on the communities that you're in, of course. But that's my experience anyway. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Can I maybe just add on to what Joe was saying in terms of even just board recruitment? So just to tell everybody the little story of how I met Joe, right? So I'm a nurse. I'm currently a geriatric outreach nurse. And so there was recently a seniors fair in our community in the local area, and I attended that fair. And so I met Joe and I found, and I was looking at sort of his presentation, and I was like, oh, you know, I live in that area. I didn't know there was a seniors home. Like, this is what I do. I'm quite passionate about it. I had seen actually a posting on, there's a group on Facebook, the Caledon East Moms, for a new board member. And I saw it and I thought, oh, this looks interesting, but nothing prompted me as much as actually meeting one of the board members. And we sort of started talking. He was saying, you know what, we would love to have your expertise on the board. So I can sort of push towards the importance of, I think, board members sort of actively looking or hearing about people that, you know, they would think would bring something to the board, and just putting themselves out there, and how important, you know, making that actual personal connection would be. So that's how I became involved. And I, you know, had we not have met, I don't think I would have been pushed as much to really consider it. But now that I know him, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting observation, Jennifer. Yeah, the personal touch is huge rather than just seeing something, you know, in the paper on social media. I was going to make the point too. I think that Joe, you kind of discussed this a little bit, but I found, you know, having volunteered for a lot of different things, that sometimes you have someone who thinks that they want to volunteer, and they probably do. And if you try to steer them, like say you need board members, you try to steer this person onto the board, but that's not really what they want to do. You know, maybe they don't have experience, or they're a little hesitant about the time commitment, because the board time commitment is pretty great. And you can do that. You can put them on the board, but in my experience, they do not stay. You know, you can't force someone, you know, a square peg into a round hole kind of thing. I think that that's something that people need to keep in mind if they're looking for volunteer board members. It's just not always a great, you know, suit, I guess you say. And, you know, finding out what their interests are and what their skills are is very important.
Yeah, and sometimes, Andrea, that you can approach people and say to them, will you help us out for the next year? You know, like they may want to come on for a specific activity, or, you know, like I would just use a bad example, but I use property management. They may well be willing to come in and be part of that board over supervision of that for a year. But, you know, so you don't have to get tied into a long-term thinking all the time when you're recruiting board members. Sometimes short-term is just as good for you.
Right. One thing that's come up, I know, you know, seeking volunteers for other organizations, especially in today's climate with younger people, you know, if you want to get younger people who are still in the workforce or who are students involved, if you have a one-time event, it's a lot easier to get volunteers for that one-time event, whether it's a fundraiser of some sort, than it is to, you know, commit to a 3-year board term or 2-year board term. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's tough to get those long-term volunteers, but you may get someone, you know, who just commits for a single time only and then gets hooked, right? So, you know, it can be a good thing as well. Rhonda just let us know we have about 40 minutes left. I think that Joe, you had mentioned the recognition. So maybe we'll move on to that now. I was just going to put a plug in for a website, and Rhonda said that she would send information on this, the web address, but it's Volunteer Canada. They have a very good website that has downloadable posters and different items to recognize National Volunteer Week, which this year will be from April 16th to 22nd. So that's a good way to kind of a time to recognize the volunteers that you do have on board already. So yeah, just it is free. That's the best thing about it. So Joe, what would you like to say about recognition in terms of the volunteers that various houses have?
Well, I guess I would go back and say it's linked to what when you bring somebody in, you think to making clear what you expect from them and making sure they're supported when they're doing the work, because once that's happening, you're probably going to have a very successful volunteer and you're wanting to find a way to say thanks to them. I mean, so it can be done. Sometimes it's done just on an ongoing basis, that you're making sure that you're spending a few minutes with the volunteer to listen to what they've been doing and to express your appreciation of what they've been doing. Other times it's more formal. You may want to wish to have an event, a dinner, or a gathering of some kind where you spend a few minutes talking with them and expressing your thanks for what they have done. So there's a variety of ways you can do it. There, you know, sometimes people use little cards, gift cards to recognize it with people. I mean, I find that's the easiest part of the process of volunteer management. The hardest part is, you know, making sure in the recruitment that you're doing some of the training that they might need to do the job, but more importantly, that you do the care and feeding and as they're on the job, you know, because that's where we always think, oh, well, we often think of volunteers as employees, and somehow we think they've got a clear job spec and they know everything that we're expecting from them. That's not always the case. I will relate to an unusual experience. Back in the 80s, I was responsible for running the social service program in the city of Toronto. And believe it or not, we had a seniors volunteer group of 20 seniors who would come in daily and man our phones to deal with seniors who had issues in Toronto. And this meant, though, we did hire a part-time coordinator for that, because it really meant somebody had to be there to, you know, make sure the information was passed on, make sure things. So it's really that care and feeding. But then in recognition, every year we definitely had an event, but also senior staff in the area would always be dropping in at least. The rule was to have them drop in at least once a week on the volunteers to make sure that people felt they were there and felt they were valued, and that they heard they were effective in what they were doing. I don't know if that helps, but I'm just saying I just wanting to emphasize that the rewards part of it, the recognition part of it, can be one time, but it's very important that it's an ongoing sort of support and recognition, you know, of the work they're doing. That is as emotional as much of it is physical in that sense.
I didn't ask, sorry.
Go ahead.
Cheryl, I left you out, and I'm sorry about that. Would you like to comment at all on your experience with recruiting volunteers and any aspect of volunteers?
Okay. In South Africa, especially for the national board, recruiting directors for the national board, and they're all volunteers, that has been done through a recruitment agency now, and we actually pay per person that is recruited. However, we have found, though, yes, we're getting quite a few academics, and yes, we do want all the good skills and everything else, but those people don't stay very long, because the academic seems to be very, very busy. And so we have them on the board maybe for a year, 18 months, whilst they commit on paper, they don't get their hands dirty. So it looks very good on their CV, but in actual fact for Abbeyfield South Africa, they don't bring to the table what we expect them to bring to the table. And more than ever, it is commitment. On a house level, for the house committees, we do seem to be struggling quite a bit with that. We have our house committees or our house boards are relatively small. So it's not unusual to find 4 people on a house committee. And yes, the volunteers we would get in would, it is if we would team up with an organization like St. John, for instance, who have scores of volunteers. But yes, again, one needs to then look at the recognition. And I think that is where we've been lacking. We don't give our volunteers the recognition and the thanks, a little thank you could mean a whole lot to somebody, be it in the form of a certificate or even a bunch of flowers or just a call and saying thank you very much. And I think that is where we've fallen short because people don't feel valued. Yes, but you would also get the volunteer that has been there for 30 years at a house. But also one then ends up almost with a stalemate because then you're not giving any young blood, new, fresh ideas, anything into the committee. But yes, I think around the world, in fact, all Abbeyfields are struggling with volunteerism. If I look at Australia as well, they're also looking at going through recruitment agencies to get their board members for the national level. So I think all in all, volunteers are a dying breed. They're not what they used to be 30, 40 years ago when we all volunteered because that was what you did. And so hopefully the younger generation, the 30s coming up, would be a different breed and we'd be able to shoulder tap a lot more of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting that what your experience in South Africa is very similar to Canada, I think, in terms of the overall lack of volunteers. And certainly COVID has not done us any favors in that at all, because it took a lot of people out of volunteering and not all those people have come back. That's what I've found in Winnipeg anyway. I was just going to mention, there was a bit of talk when we were arranging this about the idea of attracting young volunteers, youthful volunteers, I guess. In Winnipeg, we do have, some of the high schools have a requirement where their students have to do a certain number of hours of volunteering. And in my full-time job at a long-term care center, we have had a couple of students who've just completed their 10 hours of volunteering. That's kind of a one-shot deal, I guess you'd say, but it does, give the high school students a bit of an insight, I suppose, into, working with older adults in our case. I don't know if that's something that may happen in other communities where you've had that experience, Sylvia. It looks like, have you had that in Prince Albert?
Yes. Yeah, we have.
Have those volunteers stuck around for more than a couple of hours, or is it kind of do their hours and then they're out?
Oh, they don't stick around usually, no. We have looked at if we need to get more board members as volunteers. We've looked at actually going to the churches and doing a presentation in the churches, because that generation that is most commonly found in many of the churches and even some of the younger evangelical churches, they are the people that are quite interested in volunteering in our type of facility. So, and we do have a couple of people very active on our board who are very active in the churches. And so, that's probably one way that we have looked at if we need to actively start recruiting more board members.
Very good. Andrea, John, did we miss John when we went around?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry because my head's blocking
Yeah,
John's in my.
I know.
Sorry about that. I apologize, John, and your Colleen.
We are like brand new. We've only had really 2 meetings. The first meeting was just an introduction idea. So we're brand new starting this, and we're at the point where we're trying to figure out where we can start, fundraising and getting funds and moving forward with this. We do have a piece of land we can use, of course, but we need a lot of funding. So we're looking for. We do have actually quite a number of volunteers that came from an original meeting of people that were, interested in finding out about Abbeyfield. So at the present time, we have a good balanced board, but time will tell who stays and who goes. But I think it's a good mixed board of people of different ages, and but we are looking for help with regard to funding for fundraising and so forth, and which direction we would go in.
One thing that I was going to suggest, and I think that that Joe had kind of touched on this as well, is that it would be wise for boards, if you're looking for volunteers, kind of be specific on what you need in terms of the skills. If it's a board member, what type of skills do they need? In this case, it sounds like fundraising for you, John and Colleen, for your new house. And I know other provisional houses are in the same boat there. Or if it's, someone that you would like to come into the house for, a baking program or something like that. So, by, I guess, targeting a particular set of skill set, that helps somewhat. Joe, would you like to comment any further? Or I was thinking we have about 20 minutes left. We could just throw it open, and if people want to make comments or have questions,
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I think Larry has his hand up.
I do. I'm just waiting to be recognized, Ian.
Yeah,
Well,
go
you
ahead, Larry.
recognize-
Sorry.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to use the power, and we have a lot of knowledge right here. We have 15 people up here. At the beginning of this session, we had an appeal from Kathy in Saskatoon, and I was faced and in pretty much the same position she was 2 years ago. Kathy, you've taken a lot of notes, and I think we all want to help you as an example of what can be done when we all put our heads together. And I want to start out by saying there's been some tremendous ideas, and I want to encapsulate just a few things. When we talked about the basic title of this session being volunteer recruitment, responsibilities and recognition, the recruitment part of it is it's really not that difficult once you decide, and I suggest you decide to look for an operative board rather than an administrational board. In other words, the members of your board of directors are your best volunteers. And when you're looking, look for people with the skills, the talents, or the experience that you need. I have been a shameless raider of other boards, and I will admit it. And people who, unfortunately, a lot of people who are on boards, because they're successful and because they've been able to offer their skills and their talents, some of them are overloaded, but you have to try. In other words, if you're hunting rabbits, go where the rabbits are, you know? And I think we want to help you with that. So anybody on the board should be able to have a skill, talent, or the experience to be able. So your board are your volunteers. I
Larry,
think
will you
that-
come to our board?
I'm sorry?
Will you come to our board?
I'm a little far from Saskatoon. I'm in Vancouver, but I love Saskatoon.
Well,
I'll give you,
anytime.
if you want to discuss this with me, even after the meeting, I'll go through all the details and a few tricks that I've used. For instance, we built 3 raised gardens this year. I found somebody who just loves gardening. He's retired. He's not young, but he's very energetic. He worked for UBC, I think, as a librarian for most of his life. I said, go to the library, and I want you to learn everything you can about gardening and these particular vegetables, and you're in charge. He's already been with us a while. He just likes to putter and do things, but I found a passion that he has. I'll discuss every single member of our board with you. You'll call me anytime you like. I'll give you my number now, 778-997-3294. What else did I want to say? Yeah, the promotion of Abbeyfield. People don't know who we are. And the first people to speak to is the neighborhood. Go and see your neighbors, and the neighbor could be within a mile if you like. People see the sign. People don't know who we are and what we are, and invite them in, whether it's for tea, whether it's for lunch, whether it's just for a tour. Get them to come in, and don't be afraid, as somebody else suggested, speak to friends and relatives. You have no idea if they don't know what you're looking for. How do you want them to react and to come on board? We've got to do a selling job of Abbeyfield. And again, the people that are close to us are the lowest hanging fruit, and the neighborhoods are very interested anyway as to who and what's going on. What else did I want to say? Okay, those are the important things. But I think an example of what can be done by a board for a particular Abbeyfield house, we can show with this example by all of us helping you get your board together. Is everybody on board with this? Are we going to help Kathy?
Yeah, just to let you know, Larry, the national board already has this on the radar. Yeah, so we're on board for sure.
I want us all to be on board. I've heard such great ideas from everybody. And if, okay, carry on. I've said enough.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate
You're welcome. You're
your
welcome.
input for sure. And yeah, if anybody wants to send us, some great ideas or some leads, anything like that, we're certainly wide open for that. I appreciate it.
Excuse me, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. This is the whole point of this clubhouse.
Thanks. Joe, I saw your hand up, Agnes's hands up. Joe,
No,
did you talk?
I just wanted to be sure you saw Agnes and Jim are both trying to get in.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go to Agnes. We have about, we have about 10 minutes left, 10, 15 or so.
Okay, I try to be quick. For me, recognition of volunteers, it's something which I have been fighting for the longest time. I have been community leader for over 17 years. And I find that people become volunteer not because they want to be praised, but they always appreciate if they are. So I have got number of things. We do the recognition during community events, whatever we can have. We do the recognition by politicians. I have advocated for our councillors to have a special pins and give it to people when whatever type of event they can, and put in their newsletters and make sure that this people contribution are acknowledged. We do use all kind of programs. They are federal programs, they are provincial programs, they recognize recognize volunteers. And we do, within our communities, we do something called Appreciation Day, when we meet with all those volunteers and we do whatever we can for them. It could be just the lunch or dinner or fun time, or we can give them small gifts, or if we have some sort of construction like the community center and whatever, we put their name on the wall, sort of wall recognition. And finally, if we have volunteers, they coming from programs like schools or hospitals, we do write letter to their bosses to mention their contribution and their professional behavior. And that very often results, if those people being recognized or getting better scholarship or something else, they're very appreciative of that. That's just on the top of my head for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Agnes. That was a great idea. I've never heard of that, writing to the person's employer, but
Yes.
That's wonderful. That's
It works
excellent idea.
beautifully, because I had a nurse that was looking after me, and I sent a letter stating this and this and that, and she actually got promoted after all this, and she did the volunteer stuff for the community, so that was much appreciated. We forgot that we can do those simple little things, mentioning people left and right, and even if you like deal with politicians, you mentioned to your councillor that in this community they are great volunteers, they do give them some sort of appreciation letters, and it's also nice.
Thank you. Evelyn?
I agree with everything that's being said. It's very important. And I really think that it's important to get our message out. We need we're talking about fundraising. We really need to work with all three levels of government, with the municipal, the provincial, and the federal. I gave a letter to Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, at a personal meeting with him on the 11th of October. If we want money to get funding, there's a lot of grants right now. There's a crisis for housing, for affordable housing for our people. And it's going to be through applying with our members of parliament, our members of the legislature, and our municipal governments, that they know exactly what Abbeyfield is about. And I have to agree, it's very important to empower our volunteers. As we've indicated, we need to get to know their strengths and to encourage them to get involved with us on specific projects. And then to value them. That's what you've said. I have little wooden things that I say, a pocket hug from me to you that I give. I give stones, pink quartz. I give them little angels and say I appreciate it. And a smile, like kindness is going viral, showing gestures of kindness. I think we need to do that and to recognize all our volunteers, but we need to work with all levels of government. If we're going to get funding to get affordable housing, a lot of our older adults don't have money to pay for a retirement home, which is $3,000 to $6,000 a month for a room. So we need to work with our levels of government. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn. Sorry, I had Jim, I think, and then Sylvia, and then that I think we'll be out of time. So Jim, you go ahead.
Just a couple of quick suggestions for Kathy in Saskatoon. The organisation of retired teachers, generally organised by province, they've been very helpful in BC, and a lot of the retired administrators make excellent board members. And so if you could just Google them and get hold of them, they have newsletters, and that's been a good contact. The Retired Public Employees is also an organisation that's willing to help. And I'm not sure whether, Kathy, whether you've been to speak to any of the service clubs, but if you go and talk to Rotary or Lions Club, tell them you're not after their money, you don't necessarily want their time, but they're usually people with decent positions or managers, and they have employees that they're trying to bring on. And so if you appeal to them to take advantage of the learning opportunities that Abbeyfield can be, a board position on Abbeyfield, and encourage them to recommend that some of their employees that they want to move up apply to Abbeyfield for board positions. That's it.
Thanks, Jim. Sylvia? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to mention retirees. All of our board are retired people, ranging in age from early 70s up to about 88, I think. And we really keep our eyes closely on other people who are retiring that we know about. And the minute they retire, we tell them, you know, I'm sure you want to do a bit of traveling and relaxing, but after that, would you consider our board? And our board functions well. It's an operational board, but it functions well because when we have tasks to be done, we say at the board meeting, could somebody volunteer to do whatever the task is? And people volunteer to do what meets their interests most, or sometimes just because they recognize nobody else will volunteer. That's it.
Bravo.
Yeah, I have just one question. How many board members do you have on your board?
We have 11 board members, and we had 13, but one moved to Saskatoon, and another one has problems with her husband's health and had to quit. But right now we have 3 people who are interested in coming on our board possibly. And all 3 are newly retired people, retired teachers, retired nurse, retired respiratory therapist. And we anticipate that probably all 3 will come on our board.
Bravo.
Thanks, Sylvia. We're just have a couple minutes left. Joe, do you have any further comments?
Not really. I think we've talked about it as much as we can.
Good.
I mean, I just would repeat, you know, I think we have to separate a bit the board recruitment from the service recruitment, and they're kind of different approaches. The board, we have the structured processes to support people coming on, but with the service side, we need to be a lot more thoughtful about what we expect from them and how we support them and how we recognize them. So that's everything I would say.
Thank you. I just wanted to end by thanking everyone for joining in today. We had a really excellent discussion. Certainly, Kathy, we can follow up. You can follow up with the national board, and Larry has offered you some help from Vancouver House, which is great. We'll try to support your board as best we can. I was also going to put a plug in if anyone has any suggestions for future clubhouse topics. If you can send your suggestions either to myself or to Rhonda at the Abbeyfield office, that would be great. I don't know. I think roughly we're hoping to hold these once every 2 months. So I guess the next one would be in March, and we'll see what the topic is concerning, and then hopefully you know, have a board member, national board member, possibly emceeing or hosting that particular clubhouse. So again, thank you, and I hope everyone has a good weekend.
I would just like to suggest inflation and how we are combating it in our different houses for the next meeting.
That's good.
Thanks, everybody.
That's good.
Rhonda has the hand up.
Yeah, so Andrea, I just want to do a quick reach out about the awards of talking about acknowledging our volunteers and our boards, about the Robert McMullen Award, and that's coming up.
Right. Yeah, that's a slightly different kettle of fish because of it. Yeah. Yeah, we do have the nomination forms out there to all the houses for honoring a longtime volunteer. It has to be someone who has volunteered at your house for over 10 years and someone who is not currently on the national board in order to be able to be eligible for receiving the Robert McMullen Award for Volunteering Excellence, I think it is. And so we sent those out a little while back. If you didn't receive them, then please let Rhonda or myself know, and we'll resend them. The deadline for those nominations is February 27th. Good. So thanks again. And hopefully we'll see you folks again at a future clubhouse.
Well, thank you, Andrea, for.
Thank you so much. Very
Thanks,
insightful,
Andrea.
very interesting meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Well done.
Bye.
Goodbye.